So I'm going to jump in and edit some images that I took as a bit of a test when I was shooting with the oh yep, loud and clear, awesome, cheers guys. So I'm going to edit some images that I took as a test when I was shooting with the Samyang 24mm. So I haven't had a real play with these at all, so I'm going to jump in and have a bit of a play with them to sort of see what I can get out of them, and also show you guys how basic my workflow really is at the moment. So just open these up, and it's so different when you're actually looking at a screen that's got a live stream set up. There's about 1 billion windows open on my second screen there. It's extremely distracting. So this is what I'm going to sort of have a look at. This is, what do we got here? ISO 800 f2 with the Samyang 24mm, 108 seconds. I don't know why I ended up with 108 seconds, to be honest with you. It's sort of a bit of a weird shutter speed. Normally I just try and round it up. A minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes, whatever, but for some reason we've ended up with 108 seconds. But if we have a look, the lens performance is actually really, really poor in the corners. And I didn't even have a good look at these in the field. I just sort of ripped off a Panorama to sort of get a bit of a test on it. And I was going to come back and have a look at it, and here we are now having a look at it. But the chromatic aberration is shocking. Just that purple fringing around everything. Yeah, it's really, really poor. And the stigmatism. I mean, really, to be fair, it's it's not that bad, but when you get used to shooting with like really, really sharp glass, like the Sigma 40 and recently the Sigma 105, yeah, this just looks like garbage. So anyway, we'll just do a little bit of pre-processing here in Lightroom, and we'll go from there. So you can see all the images down here. I shot a full arch. And this might be a good indication for you guys too about, you know, what your raw files look like, and if you've wondered what my raw files look like, yeah, this is it. So yeah, nothing spectacular. So I'm just going to go through and do extremely basic stuff in here. I won't even bother with a white balance or anything like that. I'll do all that after I've stitched it together. I'm just going to get rid of the sharpening, and I'll just get rid of the noise reduction, and I'll see if this can remove any of the chromatic aberration and profile corrections. Try and get rid of that vignette, because that vignette's super strong. Even at, I mean, it is a 1.8 lens, but yeah, it's really, really bad, that vignette with this lens. So it's not even detecting that lens. So what is it? Samyang. So it's automatically giving me the profile for a 2.8 lens. There you go. It doesn't even have a profile for a 24 1.8. Anyway, that even using that profile for that 2.8's got rid of that vignette for us. So yeah, well, it hasn't done a very good job with that fringing at all. But anyway, so that's about all I'm going to do with in terms of pre-processing. I'm just going to copy all those settings across, and then I'm going to get rid of them out of I'll just get rid of those. Where's everyone watching from? So I know here it's a reasonable hour here in Australia, but I'm sure that translates into some shocking times around the world. So I'm going to jump over into PtGui. So let's load some images. I got one that's just here for the beers, me too. So here's our images loaded up, and I'm just going to align the images. So I'm just going to change the projection mode. My favourite is stereographic, but depending on where you post it and how you want your Milky Way to look. What's on the menu for tonight, Bailey? Blackfish. Yeah, my go-to stereographic, but the Makeda projection's also a pretty popular one, and I've recently been playing around with the different stitching software that, you know, the best projection that it has in its software is the Makeda projection, so I don't mind that one, but something about the stereographic one works really well for me. Woo. So I'm just dragging this around now to get a level horizon, or somewhat level. You're never going to get it perfect in PtGui, but you can get it reasonably close. And I'm just going to drag this up so we can see more of what I captured. And drag this one out. And then I'll drag it sort of around to the left a bit more. And that's reasonably close. Yeah, I'm just looking at that. I've got a level horizon, and that this arch is reasonably in the proportions it was when I imaged it. So that looks pretty good. And I'm just going to drag these side panels in here, just so that the stitching software doesn't save any pixels it doesn't need to. And I'm going to leave myself plenty of border, because obviously I need to rotate this around more in Photoshop. Now you could get this a lot more perfect in PtGui, but I don't mess around with it that much. I just get a flat horizon line, even if it is on that angle, and I can just rotate it around in Photoshop, as long as I leave myself enough room around the top so that when it rotates I don't lose corners when I do the crop. But for me, that's yeah, that's pretty good. So from here, I just want to check that everything looks okay. So I'm going to go into the optimizer, and I'll go into the advanced features. Now, this advanced thing doesn't always do the image any better, but by resetting all these viewpoints to optimize, it just optimizes everything, every single frame in the panorama as best as it can. And then I'm just going to run that optimizer, and it's telling me everything's very good. And then I'll go into the exposure and HDR and just try and get a blend from each frame. Even though we got rid of most of that vignette in Lightroom, I'm just going to optimize it to try and make sure every frame blends together a little bit more. And, you know, it's done a tiny little bit of blending there. So from this point, depending on how good your lens is, you might have to go in and do some masking. So I'm going to go in and have a look at the mask tab. I'll just make this a bit bigger. So what I want to do is have a look at the frames, especially around the edges, because in Lightroom when we looked, there was some really, really bad astigmatism and that in the corner, like you can see here. So what I'm probably going to do is mask out a little bit of the outsides of the frames, just so I'm telling PtGui not to use that part of the frame. It's really bad down here. So what I might do is just grab the mask, the red mask button down here, and just mask out around the outsides, just in the corners. And that just tells PtGui not to use that part of the frame. Now, if you've got good lenses, you don't have to do this. And this also can help for vignette too. If you're having issues with your stitch and your stitch, you can see the vignette lines in your final stitch, you may be able to come back and do a bit of this to get rid of a bit of that vignette. Now I also have a massive overlap on these frames. I think it was 50% overlap at least. So that gives me the ability to do this. If you shot with less overlap than that, then you wouldn't be able to do this. Victor in Spain, awesome. We've got a fair bit of the globe covered so far. Now, if you have a look in real time over here at this panorama, it might be hard to see because it'll be small on your screen, but as I'm doing this, you'll be able to watch this panorama change, the stitch change. So as I paint this in here, you should see that stitch change a little bit. Hobart, Greece. That's awesome. Yeah, this will be up on, this will get saved to YouTube, Bailey, so yep, if you've got to shoot off, mate, it should be up there when it's done. And you can actually see over on the screen where the cross is actually where I'm painting out. So I don't really need to paint out anything up the top there. It would be more where the join's going to be, somewhere down here. Probably doesn't need to be that much. Something like that. Now, obviously, I'm not going to paint the bottom of this out. Whatever astigmatism and lens defects are in the lens on this horizon row, they're just going to have to stay there. And that's just the downside of having a lens that doesn't perform very well. This is the pro version of PtGui, and there's not a, from what I can understand, there's not a great deal of difference. The main difference is the functions that I'm doing at the moment of having the ability to mask, which is, yeah, it's a lifesaver if you've got lens performance issues, vignette, things like that. And for the guys who have just jumped in, this was shot with the Samyang 24 1.8 autofocus lens. So yeah, it's not the best performing lens. So one thing we've just got to be wary of here is, because on this frame here, I've already masked out the bottom of this frame. So when I come over into this frame, I don't want to cut out too much here, because it'll end up with a gap in the panorama, and it'll actually show you over on the panorama editor if you've actually masked out too much, and you can end up with a gap. So you've just got to be mindful that you're painting out the overlap, so we're not leaving it much overlap to stitch. But there's one easy fix to this, is by Sigma lens. So I think that might do it. If I jump back into this, it shouldn't, I can't see any gaps, and yeah, it doesn't look too bad. So I'm just going to go back into the optimizer again and run it again since we've changed it. And I'll do the exposure one again now. Cool, and that's about it. So that's the stitch sorted. So we'll just go back into our project assistant. We'll create it, and we'll make it a large document, 16-bit. And that's it. One from the States watching, awesome. What time is it there? It must be middle of the night there, wouldn't it? Paul, have you tried the 24 1.4? No, I haven't. I believe there's two versions of that now, isn't there? There's the dedicated mirrorless version, which is supposed to be really, really good, and then the older DSLR version, which, from what I'm aware of, isn't that good. But I'm really keen to try the 28mm Sigma. That's probably going to be the next purchase, I would say. So here's the panorama stitch here. Sweet. So I'm just going to flatten it to get rid of this mask that PtGui gives us. And then for the first little bit, I'm just going to essentially get a 0 point, what I call a 0 point for panoramas, which is get everything set, ready to start editing. So I'm just going to get it somewhat level. the older one, Z7 II. Yeah, I haven't tried that 24. It's yeah, it's a focal length that I don't use that often, but after shooting this one, or this image, and then an image that I made with the Star Adventurer Mini, yeah, it's a reasonable focal length. It's really, really easy to just blaze through all the images and get them done. So it's a really cool focal length to get panoramas done quick and with still reasonable resolution, which we'll have a look at in a second, see what resolution this is at. So this is where I would start editing from. This is a decent crop. Now, obviously, the crop later would be brought down to put a foreground in here, but I didn't shoot a foreground with this guy. This was just all about testing this lens out. Go around, just bought PtGui. That's gold. So let's have a look at the resolution on it. So let's have a look at it in centimeters. So it's 2 meters wide, which is ridiculous. I might just make a little bit smaller. So I'll make it 1.5 meters wide. I'm not sure what that is for you people who use a weird measurement system. There you go, inches. So we're now at a decent starting point for this image. So the focal length for this was 24 millimeters with the Samyang 24 1.8. And you can see by using that masking technique in PtGui, we've done a reasonable job of masking out all that lens performance issues. I mean, we've still got that really bad chromatic aberration in there, but all that astigmatism, we've masked it out. So we've only used the good parts of the lens. There's a little bit there that's snuck in, but that's okay. So at this point here, what I would do would be, I can do a color balance on it straight away, and then I've got to deal with this air glow, so I'll do a quick color balance on it, and I'll normally just do it in camera raw filter to get just a basic understanding of the colors in the image, and then as I go through the image, I'll continue to color balance it as I go. So, you know, the old trick of saturating it and vibrancing it to 100% and then doing a color balance from there works pretty well for a pretty basic somewhere about there is probably pretty close. It is very blue in here, and we'll have to sort that out later, but yeah, that's a decent base to get started with. So what I'm going to do is, just to show you guys how much air glow is in this image, I'm just going to duplicate this layer. I'm just going to stretch it a little bit. Now what you can see is the air glow is the whole sky. It's not just down on the horizon area where you would normally see it. It's the whole sky is glowing like crazy. So for my taste, I normally get rid of the air glow in the upper portions of the image, and I've been doing that for probably 12 months now with Pixinsight. It does a pretty good job of getting it a background glow, but you know, some people like that look of the air glow being through the whole image. So yeah, it's just a taste thing, but for me, I like to get rid of it up the top because I just feel it looks a bit nicer to have the air glow down where you would normally expect to see it, and then up higher, you know, up the top here, you're getting pretty high up in the sky where you wouldn't normally expect to see the crazy fingers of air glow. But in this one, we've obviously got it the whole way. So what I'm going to do is just create a new document and paste that into it. And then I'm going to save it. I don't know what to name these things. Stitch of glow. I'm going to make it a TIFF. And just open up that file in Pixinsight. Jeez, Grant. So I don't do much in Pixinsight. It's a phenomenal program that's got some awesome features that I have no idea how to use. It is designed more for deep space stuff, but there's a lot of cool Milky Way images being produced using some of the processes in Pixinsight. But the main one that I use for this at the moment is the dynamic background extraction, and it just gets rid of the glow or the colors in the background, which for me, yeah, gives me a better image, and for my taste anyway. Just make that a bit bigger. That's fine. I'm just asking it to generate some samples, and this process is like a lot of other gradient removal programs where you put control points or whatever you want to call it on parts of the image that's just got background sky. And it'll actually get rid of all that. Now, hopefully, not too many questions come up about PtGui because I'm definitely not an expert at it. Let's get rid of that one there. That should be reasonable. And then I'm just going to ask it to subtract. Now, some of the images that I do that don't have crazy air glow all the way up to the zenith, I won't use this process. And some, yeah, some I will, some I won't. I'll just sort of do a test for each image and then go from there. But you can see this is actually what it's removed from the image. So all this, the gradients, and then this dark spot that was sort of in there, it's got rid of that, and yeah, just all that background muddy air glow that was in there, and what it's left us is a really clean, even though the color balance is off, but a really clean background sky. So we'll save this one. Yep, dynamic background extraction, that's fine, we'll save that. 16-bit. Cool, that should be us for Pixinsight. So I've opened this up again in Photoshop. Yeah, rightio. So Dean's saying Cyril has a background extraction that works pretty good. What's that? Graxpert does it also. And they're all free. Yeah, so that's, if they work and they're free, that's awesome. Yeah, I haven't tried any of those other ones at all. So I've just pasted this, the background extraction one, over the top of the original. And the reason I do that is just because I don't want to actually use the whole extracted frame for the image. I actually want to keep the bottom half of the original, so I'm just going to put a mask on that top layer and just grab a gradient. Ew. I'm just going to put a gradient on there. And this is just trial and error about how much you actually want to remove, and it's really hard to tell at the moment if you've removed too much until you get way down the process in editing, and then you think, oh, it's probably a bit much, but maybe something like that, I think. So Brett, yeah, he's had a bit of issue with a lot of light coming from the farmers' tractors working into the night. Yeah, I'm not sure how you go with light pollution or light from tractors and those sort of things. I've never sort of used it for that, but yeah, it might be worth a go. It is a good software to use. Like, it is expensive, but it's got some really, really cool features on it that, yeah, like I said, I don't use a lot of them at the moment just because I don't know how to use them very well, but there's some guys doing some phenomenal stuff with Milkyway stuff using Pixinsight. So it's one of those programs that's an investment, one-off payment, and then, yeah, you can just keep learning with it as you go. So I think that'll do. I think that's reasonable. So I'll merge that layer down, and this is sort of getting close to a good starting point to start editing from. The only thing I can see here is this dark spot is still there, and I just want to get rid of that before we go too much further. So I'm just going to grab the lasso tool and just do a selection around where it's a bit darker there, and I'll just do a brightness and contrast layer, and you can see it's obviously just created that layer mask where we done the lasso tool, and I'll just bring up the brightness. maybe decrease the contrast of it. Click on the mask and feather that mask right out. Yeah, it's got rid of a heap of it. I might go back in later and fix a bit more of that. So we'll merge that one down, and this has given us a really good base to start from. So what I'm going to do now is get rid of the stars. Just going to duplicate this a couple of times and run star exterminator on it. Now we did reduce this down to what, about 1.5 meters wide at 300 PPI, so it's a fairly large file to try and remove the stars from. So this might take a little while. So what I might do is, while this is running, it might take 5 or 10 minutes. So it might give us an all opportunity to stretch our legs and go and grab a beer. Unless there's any more questions coming through at the moment that I can. Hey, Alan Wallace, thanks for joining, man, from Istanbul. Cheers, dude. Oh, yeah, man. You got to have a beer while you're editing, just kicking back. Yeah, man, this will be posted. This will get saved to YouTube later, so however long it goes for, I don't know. It'll it'll get saved straight away, so it'll be up there after you finish work. Cheers for tuning in while you're at work. I won't tell your boss. Brendan. Yeah, my pleasure, mate. Gradient removal. Yeah, so Brendan's saying here that Gradient Exterminator works as a plugin for Photoshop. That's cool. So I've never tried that either. That was the cool thing about having Pixinsight, was that a lot of the plugins that you get for Photoshop are all in Pixinsight. It's just trying to figure out the names of them, and you know, they've got real funny names for different things. And if you're used to using Photoshop, you look at Pixinsight for a process and the names doesn't make any sense. So if you can get your head around that, that's pretty cool. So any issues with Star Exterminator, like a grid of squares appearing on the starless image? I have in the past, mostly with the older iterations of Star Exterminator. The latest update, whatever it is, seems to work really well. And I think the only times I get crazy sort of squares is if I really stretch it and stretch it and stretch it. But yeah, I haven't had it recently, so you you watch now. I'll get it in this image for sure. John Mitchell, good evening. Hey, mate. Come on, Alan. It's never too early for a beer. Have I used StarNet? Yes, I have. I used to have StarNet in Pixinsight and used that, but I now just use Star Exterminator. That's funny because I hear some people say StarNet's way better, and other people say that Star Exterminator is way better. But for me personally, Star Exterminator is phenomenal, so yeah, I'll just keep using that one. So John, that's a Windows error. I haven't had that one before, but I have recently just switched over to Mac, so maybe that's why I'm not seeing it. I'm not sure. Cool. So it's done a really, really, really good job. I don't know how well that's coming across on YouTube, but it does a really, really good job. It's just silky smooth. And so now I'll just get a star mask essentially. I'll copy that layer and bring it down between these two. Change this one to divide. Invert that layer. Invert that one. Merge that layer down. Invert that layer back. And here's our star mask. Cool. So this is sort of the base where I would start editing from. I know it seems like we've been going forever, which we sort of have, but all those steps were just to get me somewhere to start editing from. And for me, this is where I start editing from. And I know some guys stretch the images with the stars in there. I don't. I take the stars out and then do stretching and then just put the stars back. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's just sort of the way I do it. There you go. So this is one of the other problems with having lenses that don't give you round stars. Star Exterminator hasn't seen these as stars because they're so wobbly or they're not round. Anyway, so from here, we've got a couple of new people to the party. Richard over at Nightscape Images, welcome. Better late than never. Benjamin, welcome. Is there a reason you don't use the subtract blend mode? I used to use that subtract blend mode, but from Russell Croman himself, he recommends using this way of dividing it and inverting the layers and that sort of thing. So that's straight from him, and obviously he's the developer of the software. So yeah, if it's straight from the horse's mouth to do it that way, I'll do it that way. So that's the reason why. So from this point here, I've just copied the layer. So I've always got a copy of the original because it's going to start to get crazy quick, and I want to have backups of the original. So now I'm just going to start stretching this image out and start seeing what's actually there. Shaitan, welcome. So I've done an initial stretch there to just so you can see what's actually in the image. Now as we start to stretch this, I'm going to have to be really careful of the core here. In and around the core here. So it's going to get really bright really quick. So that initial stretch is pretty good. And I'm just going to keep merging this layer down after each stretch just so that I can mask in each additional stretch from here. Emelian, welcome. So we'll go again and stretch this again. So now you can see here, it's really, really blown out. So I'm just going to mask out this part of and anywhere else where it's going to get too bright. Karuna normally gets super blown out super quick, so we'll just protect that one. It's not looking too bad. So I'll merge that one down again. Douglas, welcome. Now I think one more I don't know if it's going to push the limits here. So what I'm just watching is right above the horizon line, sort of down in this area here, and this area here. So the histogram's showing us that we're actually clipping the blacks at the moment, but we've got to remember that it'll be clipping the blacks on the bit of the foreground that's actually showing through this, at the bottom of this image here. So it's not actually giving us a true representation of the histogram. If we wanted a proper representation, I would crop it in, or you could even just do a clone stamp of the horizon itself, so this histogram actually represents what's here. But so I'm just using my eye to best gauge, and right here, pretty much on the limit. It's going to get super contrasty. Welcome, Benjamin. I think that's probably somewhere close. And same again, I'm going to have to mask this out just because it's completely blown out now. There you go, Eric. You've learned something awesome. So I'll just do it again, mask this out here. So Benjamin Barricat's chimed in and about that StarNet versus Star Exterminator, saying that StarNet he's found works better on wider focal lengths, Star Exterminator better on longer stuff. But yeah, they're both phenomenal programs, and I just can't. What did we do before we had software like that? Really. So at this point, it's actually looking really, really good, and all we've done is stitch the panorama together, taken a bit of the gradient out of it, and stretched it, and it looks really, really cool. So I'm happy with where that's at the moment. So what I'm going to do is jump into Camera Raw and try and get another color balance done on it, just so we sort of know where we're going as we keep progressing. So what you can see is because we've used the dynamic background extraction, it means that we've got a really, really warm tone at the bottom and a cool tone at the top. That just simply means we're going to have to do two color balances, which is fine. It's all part of it's all part of the game. So I'll do a color balance now for the top half of the image, and then I'll come back and do another color balance for the bottom. So what I'm looking at here is essentially from the core up, the colors in there. So same as usual, just trying to get a nice even balance of blues, greens, yellows, magentas, to get us somewhere in the ballpark for that top half of the image. Which is probably somewhere there. So you can see what we've done. You can see that blue tone that was in the top is now a lot more neutral at the top. So what I'll do is I'll throw a layer mask on that one and I'll mask that in. Chat's going well. A lot of StarNet versus Star Exterminator going on in there. I love it. So something like that's probably pretty good. I'm just going to jump into this mask here. Righto, that's reasonable. I'll merge that one down and then I'll start again. Now it may look funny at the moment because we've done the background neutralization or background extraction on the top half. The top half is a lot less contrasty than the bottom half, so that's why the top looks brighter than the bottom. So after we fix these colors a little bit more, we'll go in and actually make the whole image sort of a bit more even with contrast. So now same again, all I'm looking at is from the core down with the color balance. Probably somewhere there is close. And we're getting pretty close to a neutral color balance there. I'm just going to throw a mask on that and I think that's reasonable. Rightio. So now I'm just going to fix the contrast difference top to bottom. So I'm just going to start with this and just try and drag down the top of the image here. See how we go with that. But obviously we don't want it over the whole image. Just going to invert that and then brush it in. Just going to feather this mask out. That's a heaps better sort of neutral look at that sky. It's not too bright at the top. I'm waiting for someone to comment and say, stop merging your layers down. I'm just used to it. I'm just used to working with minimal layers and sort of, I've always got the backup there. I know that backup now is like 10 steps ago, but yeah. So the only thing I can see at the moment is we've still got this weird circle here that's bothering me. See if we can fix that. That's a little bit better. So at this point, I think we're almost ready to put some stars back in. Although that aqua was really bothering me. There's a bunch of different ways you can change your colours. Obviously the hue and saturation adjustment layer, but I think we should be able to get most of this out with the colour mixer. Maybe. What a pain. Yeah, it's really subtle. I'm not sure if that's going to show up in the live stream, but it's definitely got rid of a bit of that aqua hue that's sort of around the core there. Yeah, so we're getting pretty close to putting these stars back in, I think. So what I'm going to do is just bring the stars back on top. Put them in linear dodge, and then I'm going to add the levels to that layer. I'm going to clip it to the star layer, and just bring down the levels on the This is always a hard one to get right. You think you've got it right in computer, and then you see it on your phone screen, or you post it and then it looks like the image doesn't have any stars in it, and but there's still plenty of stars there. Dan, Hobby, welcome. So one really impressive thing about this already is, even with the settings we had of, what were they, f2, 108 seconds, also 800 I think they were, can't remember. These images were pretty underexposed, and zooming in we've still got very minimal noise. So we're zoomed in, I don't know how many percent that is, 350%, and you can just start to see a bit of noise. So we've got a really, really clean image, but we'll do a bit of noise reduction towards the end. Now at this point, what I would do would be group these, put that in a group. And then we've got our stars here in a group. Actually, how about we just make a stamped? So now I've actually got the stars baked in. So I'm going to go in now and do a high pass filter on this, try and get a little bit more contrast out of that core. And this is one of those filters that can get out of hand pretty quick, so we'll just take it nice and steady. A good way to tell if you've got a good radius on your high pass filter is just to look at Fuki, and you'll see what the change is here. So you can barely see that, all that nice orange. You can start to see it coming up there. You can see it a lot there. And there's going to come a point where somewhere there's reasonable, where if you go any more, you're not going to get any more benefits. And we'll just change that blend mode. We'll just do it in soft light. Now, with it applied to the whole image, it's super crunchy. Like, it does give us heaps of definition in the air glow and everywhere, but it just makes it super punchy. It's just like taking the clarity slider to 8000 in Lightroom. So I'm going to put a layer mask on it and invert that layer mask and just go in and selectively put it in where we want to put it. And Hoppy, yeah, I have switched to Mac, so yeah, I got sick of the performance of PC, so I went out and invested in the MacBook Pro, and it's phenomenal. But the only thing is, for anyone who can tell me a shortcut for the zoom, the brush size, zoom in and out, I can't figure it out on a Mac. So I think on a PC it was Alt right click and then you drag left and right, and that would do your brush size immediately. But on this, I'm using the bracket keys and it's driving me bonkers. So I'm just brushing this in where we want it. Give some nice cool detail. Now this is one of those tools where if the data's not there, it's just not there. There's no point in trying to pull something out that's not there. And for me, this region of the sky and even this nebulosity up here, it's pretty faint in this image. Obviously the signal wasn't real good, so, and there was all that air glow. So I'm not going to try and push the image past where it actually is. I'm just going to, yeah, sort of stay within the lanes of the image. So I'm just going to paint in some of this high pass filter, and you can see what it does. It's pretty brutal. So you can see the difference it's making to these darker regions, giving it heaps and heaps of contrast. And it's really cool the first time you use it. You think, man, this is awesome, look at all that detail, but you'll quickly realise that you can overcook something very fast. Cheers, Ray. Have a good one, mate. Dan, do I use high pass on highlights too? You mean to try and bring out more stuff? It's funny how the Milky Way just disappears into all that atmospheric garbage. So what we've ended up with is a really, really crunchy, like there's some really cool details there, don't get me wrong, but it's pretty baked. Hey Alan, welcome. So yeah, she's pretty baked on there, so I'm just going to bring this opacity down. Maybe somewhere like 65. So that's getting pretty close. That doesn't look too bad at all. So I'll merge that one down. I'll duplicate that one. And I'm just going to go in and just do a little bit of, excuse me, dodging. Where are we? Just bring this down super, super low. We're just dodging the highlights a little bit. Just trying to get a little bit more body into that Milky Way. Now, obviously, you don't need it in here because the minute I put it in here, I'm just going to blow it out. So let's give it a bit of glow or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's super subtle, but that color balance is really bothering me at the top. Just wondering if you've experienced high pass works better before or after you put the stars back in. Yeah, I've done it both ways, and I sort of flip-flop between the two. Yes, when you do the high pass, it will add a lot more contrast to the stars as well. But yeah, I'm sort of back to doing it with the stars back in, but you can do it with without the stars in there. The hard thing to do it without the stars in there is because the stars actually sort of put sharpness back into the image, because the image tends to look really soft and blurry without the stars. It's hard to tell what you're doing and if it's actually sharp. And yeah, it's easy to overdo it without stars in there, but when you've got stars, I find that it's a little bit easier to tell if you're overdoing it or not. What I'm going to do is try and fix this green in the sky. It's really bothering me. I'm just going to do a curves layer and see what Photoshop thinks the color balance in there should be. Not much better. Yeah, it's this blue and a bit of the blue that's poking out behind here that really bothers me. So I don't want it over the whole image. I just want it in parts. I'm just going to brush it in. It's probably my biggest thing I concentrate on editing is color. I'm not even sure that I think it's better than it was. So there's not actually that much more I would do to this sky, except for we obviously haven't done any noise reduction or any sort of saturation or things like that. So that's the only things I would add to this, would be go in and do a bit of some saturation. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. There's a really cool way that Dan Zafra from Capture the Atlas does his saturation and vibrance, and that is to duplicate your layer and then put your top layer to luminosity and then bottom layer to soft light, and then you can create a group out of those layers. And then that's a saturation layer that goes on, and then because we're in a group there, we can just mask that group. And it's way too much over the whole thing, but I think we can use it selectively. I don't want any of it. I don't want any of it up the top here. I'm just going to put a massive feather on that. And you can see it's just given a glow to that air glow on the horizon. Maybe that's even a bit too much, but I'll do another stamp layer to give us another base to work from. And I'll just go into Camera Raw and do selective color adjustments from there. Now all these color adjustments I'm doing, I'm just going to be looking at the air glow itself. I'm not going to worry about how it affects the Milky Way or anything like that. So I'm just going to selectively brush it in by putting a layer mask on this Camera Raw filter. So there's no scientific way I do this. I just look at it and go, you know, obviously I've got yellows and oranges in the air glow, so you can change what you want the image to look like. I'm not going to change the hue of it. The most powerful one I found is the luminance, so you can get some really cool, it really brings out a lot of structure in air glow when you use luminance. So you can really bring it up. It just gives you all that, you know, structure, but it can make it look a bit like light pollution on that horizon, and there's no light pollution here at all. It was pure border one skies. But lifting that luminance up robbed us a bit of saturation. Maybe something like that. It's really easy to go overboard because you see all these colours, and it's really easy to go overboard. I think something like that'll do. So you can see it's just given a bit of a pop to that air glow, and I'm going to put a layer mask on that, and I'm going to invert it, and I'm just going to brush it in selectively in a few places. I don't want to go too overboard with it. And I'm just going to feather that right out. Is this different to how you guys do it? We're very interested to hear if this is all very similar to what you guys currently do, or if it's different. So what I'm going to do now is just give it some noise reduction. And this noise exterminator works really, really well. I know there's a lot of denoise software out there and a lot of discussion around it, but maybe I'm a bit of a Russell Croman fanboy, but the stuff that guy produces just seems to be phenomenal. So yeah, when he had this noise exterminator come out, I was like, yep, it'll do me. I'll have a bit of a look at the noise we've got in this image. And as you can see, we've got essentially zero noise. So just to give you an idea of, there's some nice pretty stars. Give you an idea of what that noise exterminator done. So that was the noise before, and this is after. So it does a really, really good job. So you could print this massive and you could stand a foot from it and you wouldn't see any noise. It's just super smooth. Might be a little bit soft. I might have went a little bit hard on that. That's not too bad. I hate zooming in on images that have poor lens performance. So every time I zoom in, I just look at the stars and go, oh, that's terrible, that's terrible. Like right here. What is that? And here. Anyway. So, at this point here, pretty much ready for some final touches, and I normally crop a 2:1 ratio, which if I was going to put a foreground in this, would be a lot lower than what this is, because I would need to lower this here to put foreground in somewhere like that even. But that's the challenging thing about shooting the Milky Way in the Southern Hemisphere. When it's in this orientation, it's super high, so it's really hard to get a panorama aspect without shooting really wide and having the Milky Way sort of squished in the middle, if that makes sense, just because it's so high. But that's somewhere where I would crop it, maybe get a little bit more central than that. And I might just throw a foreground on it. At this stage, it's really hard to gauge where the edit's at without having a foreground in there, and I always edit my skies like this, and then I'll put a foreground in there and do the blend. So what I might do is I might grab a foreground from so this image was actually shot at the same location I shot the image with the Star Adventurer Mini. So in this frame here, you can actually see this tree here. So this is the tree that was in the image. I'll show you. Where are you? This one here. So these are that's the foreground shots. This was all the time-lapse images from the YouTube video. And the sky shots are sort of scattered through, I believe. I'm not sure where they all are. Oh yeah, so here's a sky shot from that panorama. So I've got the foreground that's got this tree in it, so I might just plonk that. I might plonk this foreground in front of that image. So this is where I would sort of get a gauge of the panorama aspect ratio. But that sky looks like it's way too low. Which it is, somewhere about there. And if you're dragging skies down but below the horizon, stop doing it. Everyone knows you're doing it. Especially here in the southern hemisphere when you've got Magellanic clouds that you can use as a gauge of how far you've tucked the sky behind your horizon. So putting a sky in front of a foreground sort of gives you gives me a better understanding and idea of luminosity, how bright the sky is. Does it need to come down, up? Is it too contrasty? What I've got to do with the foreground. I'm not going to go into massive detail with the foreground blend, but what you can see at the moment is the panorama that we stitched in PtGui actually isn't flat. It comes up on that end. So I'll just do a quick little warp, puppet warp, just to get the horizon back to where it needs to be. I'll just put a few of these control points in. And if you haven't used Puppet Warp before, it's a very interesting tool to use. Essentially what you need to think about is it's going to rotate around the points that these pins you put in. So these pins, essentially, like the word suggests, it's a pin, and wherever you start yanking on it, it's going to yank in relation to these pins. So if I didn't put these pins where I did, the whole image would start to warp. But because I've put 4 pins in here, it's pinned that half of the image, so that half of the image isn't going to change. And when I select this one and start dragging down, you'll see it's just going to rotate that side of the frame down somewhere there to get it back to level. And when we put our foreground back in, it's now, you know, there's a little bit poking out here, but I'm not going to yank that down. That's not because the horizon's not flat, it's because that mountain there, it's in a different orientation to this image here, the foreground image, so I'm not too worried about that. So just quickly on this foreground layer, I'll just clip a brightness and contrast extremely quickly, just to bring this down so it's a bit more silhouette-y. And the image sort of looks a bit flat at the moment, so that's the great thing about putting it in a foreground. The image doesn't have, to me, any sort of punch, vibrance, whatever. So what I'm going to do is, on this sky layer, I might actually duplicate that layer just so I've got a backup, and go into a camera raw filter, and I'm just going to yank up on the whites just to try and give behind the tree and along that horizon line a little bit more punch. And like always, I'm just going to put it on I'm going to mask it in. I'll invert that layer, and I'm just going to brush it in where I want it, which is sort of behind that tree, to give it a bit more of a silhouette look and give it a bit more of a punchy look. And I think that looks reasonable. I'm not sure what the colours are coming off like through a live stream, and whatever device you're working on, it's always really hard to edit colour when you don't know what it's going to be viewed on. So I hope it doesn't, the colours don't look too crazy, whatever you're viewing it on, but they look reasonable for what I'm viewing it on at the moment. So I'll merge that layer down. And this blend is a terrible blend. You know, the tree looks a bit blue, and there's obviously haloing on the horizon, but this isn't about a blending tutorial, so most people want to know about the sky, not the foreground. So I'm just going to merge those layers, because we've got this foreground mask, we can have a merge layer now, and whatever I want to do to the sky, I can then just apply this foreground layer mask to it, and it'll only affect the sky. So yeah, it should be cool. Cool, Brett. Awesome. I'm glad you're getting something out of it. At this stage, it's really, really nitty gritty stuff now, and I'll go into camera raw. You're probably seeing a common theme here about jumping back and forth from camera raw and Photoshop, and the great thing about it is it's got some really good tools, same as Lightroom, but the downside to Lightroom is you can't selectively mask them in, so you can do some really cool stuff just with these sliders, and you can just affect, you know, individual parts of the image just by simply masking them in. So you don't have to be a genius at Photoshop and know all the tools and all the crazy stuff that it has. You can just simply jump back and forward from Camera Raw and Photoshop and just, yeah, selectively mask them in. And you can mask it in however you want. You can go as deep as you want with plugins that do luminosity masking for you, or you can, you know, just rough it in with a brush or whatever. So yeah, it's really cool. So I love a bit of a vignette, so this will get a vignette. But at this stage, now that the image is essentially done, I'll just use these basic settings that you would use in Lightroom to see if it's going to add or take away anything from the image. So, you know, you could go crazy and dehaze the crap out of it, which I'm not going to do. But one thing to look at is when you're using Camera Raw, because you've got the ability to selectively do it, what you might say is, geez, I like the way that dehaze brought out the core a bit more. So you can just look at things individually and say, oh yeah, I like that. And for instance, if I hit OK, put a layer mask on that, invert the layer mask, and then just come in and selectively brush that in. You may like the way that looks. Obviously it's really, really harsh, so you'd put a big feather on it. So you can do little selective edits like that. I don't actually mind the look of that, but it's way too hard. Something like that. I'll just keep going, just keep going back and forth. So what I'm going to do is just try and I'm just going to try and fix that color balance in the Milky Way core. So it's just fixing that color a little bit from that really cool aqua tone, just warmed it back up a little bit in that core region, which I like. Isn't it funny how we try and get away, use profile corrections and stuff to get vignetting off lenses when we do individual images, but then, well, for me anyway, shoot a nice big panorama and then once it's all done, come back and put a vignette on it. I just think it's pretty funny, especially when, like, you look at lenses and do lens reviews and, you know, talk shit about a lens because it's got terrible vignette and then we put them back in. But that's pretty much it. It's really hard to tell how this looks on your screen. On my screen, it's a little bit dark. So if it's a little bit dark, you can do just basic brightness to pick the brightness of the whole image up. And then I would just mask it, mask it out of the brighter spot so that we don't have any blown out sections. yeah, like I said, it's hard to tell what you're viewing this on, so that brightness is somewhere reasonable. We've lost a little bit of contrast in our sky just because we've added that brightness. So if you want to bring that back, you can very basically bring it back with a bit of contrast, and then you can paint that in. Something like that. But that's pretty much a finished image for me. I mean, I wouldn't do too much more with it. Like I said before, I'm not going to keep pushing for details that just aren't there. The image will just start falling apart, and it's pretty obvious to tell when people are trying to edit images past what's actually in the image. So Ralph-Yuki looks cool. Has it got the crazy deep space sort of look? No, it doesn't. But that's okay, because the exposure time and the seeing on the night just wasn't there to have, you know, phenomenal details in this part of the sky, as well as all the hydrogen alpha. I'm not going to try and push this anymore. If I really wanted to, I could go and add selective saturation to all the red spots to get them to pop that little bit more, but you know, I'll do it now and I'll show you. It's not it's definitely not for everyone. So I would simply then invert this mask and go back in and paint in where the H alpha sort of, where this H alpha data. So yeah, you get a little bit out of it, but and that's about it. Well, you can see a bit of the gum region here. It's not worth trying to get any detail out of that. It's so low on the horizon, it's just completely destroyed by all this atmosphere. So that's one thing about this location. It seems to be super hazy and super air glowy whenever I go out there. I don't know why. It's really hard to get good details low down on the horizon. So that's it. That's a start to finish edit on how I put together my skies. Now, like I've said to you guys before, there's every time I do an image, I might do it a slightly different way, and the way I've done it this evening, it's a pretty straightforward way and a pretty basic way to do it. Simple stitch, simple stretch, get the colours right, a bit of vibrance, and that's about it, to be honest with you. There's not a great deal else I've done. I have forgot to do something, actually. Just goes to show how good those single frames are. I haven't even sharpened the image yet, so how about we just sharpen it a little bit. give it a little bit of a sharpen. Yeah, this should be enough. Yeah, she's super crispy now. So there you go. That's it. It's all pretty straightforward stuff. Yeah, I hope you got something out of it, and if you didn't, it's all good. Thanks for joining along, and hopefully you're enjoying a nice cool beer or cuppa, nice cup of coffee if it's somewhere in the AM where you're living. Yeah, I appreciate you tuning in, and if you like this style of content, let me know. And for you guys who are watching this recorded later, let me know if you got anything out of it, and if this is the sort of content you want to see going forward, let me know. I'm happy to sit here and have a beer and chat with you guys and show you a few things that might help you guys out. So that's about it.